Quinn Darnell didn't miss flights, he owned a private jet. A fleet of them, actually. But when you're trying to stay low-key, for just one day, one single day, without a driver or assistant or someone breathing down your neck, and your phone dies in the middle of LAX while grabbing a coffee from a kiosk, apparently, anything can happen. Like watching the boarding gate close in your face. "Wait," he called, jogging toward the gate as the airline staff shut the door. "I'm sorry, sir," the woman said, not looking the least bit sorry. "The gate's closed, you'll have to rebook for the next flight," he blinked. "I was supposed to be on that flight to New York. There's one leaving in 4 hours," he exhaled, jaw tight. His assistant, Mark, was going to lose it, and the investors' meeting, not reschedulable. He turned away from the counter, raking a hand through his dark hair. No phone, no charger. No assistant, no jet, no plan. Then he heard her voice. "You okay?" He looked up and saw her dark curls tied in a messy ponytail, wearing a Navy staff vest over a white T-shirt, a lanyard around her neck. Her eyes were the kind of brown that made you look twice. Warm, curious. "I missed my flight," he said flatly. "Yeah, I saw." She nodded to the gate. "Brutal." He gave a humorless laugh. "That's putting it mildly." "You've got carry-on, right?" she asked, glancing at his leather duffel. "You didn't check anything?" He shook his head. "No, just that. Good. That'll make this easier." She motioned for him to follow. "Come on," he hesitated. "Where? I work here. We'll see what I can do." Quinn followed her through the terminal, weaving past kiosks and clusters of travelers. Her badge read Delilah Vaughn Guest Services. "I can't promise anything," Delilah said, leading him toward the rebooking desk in a quieter part of the terminal. "But sometimes if you talk to the right person, you can hop a standby flight." He raised an eyebrow. "You do this for every poor soul that misses a flight," she grinned. "Only the ones who look like they're about to combust." "I'm not combusting." "You're definitely combusting." He gave her a look, but the corner of his mouth twitched, just slightly. Delilah reached the desk and spoke to an older man named Eddie who clearly adored her. After a few minutes, she turned back to Quinn. "There's a flight in 90 minutes with a no-show. I got you on the standby list, but there's a chance you'll have to wait for the next one." Quinn exhaled. "Thanks, really," she shrugged. "What else would I be doing, pushing wheelchairs, yelling at people who block moving walkways? This is the highlight of my day." He glanced at the empty chair beside her. "You busy for the next hour?" Her brows lifted. "Why?" "Because I don't have a phone, a charger, or a working brain right now, and you're the only person at this airport who doesn't seem to hate me," she laughed. "You're lucky I just clocked out." They found a quiet cafe near the terminal windows. Quinn bought her a coffee and a muffin, and they sat across from each other, sunlight pouring in through the massive glass wall behind them. "So," she asked, tearing a piece off her muffin, "where were you headed?" "New York. Business." "What kind of business?" He paused. "Tech." She tilted her head. "You're being evasive, I'm being private." Delilah laughed. "Okay, Mr. Private Tech Guy, no phone, no charger, no flight. You sure you're not just a very convincing conman?" He grinned. "You caught me. My real name's Bob. I'm actually just looking for someone to buy me lunch." "Bold move, Bob." They talked for the next hour like they'd known each other for years. He learned she used to be in nursing school before her dad got sick and she had to drop out. She learned he liked his coffee black, hated elevators, and once got stuck in a revolving door for over 5 minutes. When the announcement came that Quinn's name had cleared for standby, he stood reluctantly. "Well," he said, "this is where I disappear forever, right?" Delilah stood too. "Seems that way," he hesitated. Can I get your number?" "No phone, remember? Right." He looked around. "Pen." She reached into her bag and handed him a pen. He scribbled the number on the back of his boarding pass and handed it to her. "I'll call you," he said. "You don't have my number." "I'll figure it out," she laughed. "You're full of it," he smiled. "Maybe, but I'm serious." She watched him walk toward the gate, then looked down at the boarding pass in her hand. On the back, written in sharp handwriting, "Quinn Darnell, call me." "Even if you think I'm full of it," she flipped it over, "first class. JFK, seat 2A." The name rang a bell. She pulled out her phone and typed it in, the first headline that popped up. Quinn Darnell, billionaire tech investor buys out social app for $5 billion. Delilah blinked at the phone. You've got to be kidding me. Quinn sat tensely in seat 2A, unsure if it was because he hated flying commercial or because he just met someone who made him forget about a billion-dollar meeting. He kept replaying her laugh, the way she teased him without caring who he was. For the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about numbers or acquisitions or boardrooms. He was thinking about Delilah Vaughn, and he wasn't going to let her disappear just because he made his flight. 3 days passed. Quinn stared out the window of his Manhattan penthouse, lights from the city blurring against the glass like stars melting into the skyline. He held a drink in his hand untouched and tried to focus on the presentation open on his laptop. Numbers, projections, market trends. It might as well have been written in another language. His mind kept drifting back to the gate, to the cafe, to her, Delilah Vaughn. He hadn't stopped thinking about her since the moment his plane lifted off. Something about her had disarmed him completely. The way she didn't care who he was. The way she looked at him like she saw through the tailored clothes and the guarded answers, like she knew there was more under the surface. Mark, he called, setting the glass down. His assistant appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand. Yes, sir, I need you to find someone. Mark blinked. A person, woman, she works at LAX in guest services, first name Delilah, last name Vaughn. Do you know which airline? No. Do you know what shift she works? No. Mark hesitated. Sir, there are literally hundreds of employees, find her. Mark nodded slowly. Anything else? Yes, Quinn said, returning to the window. Clear my schedule tomorrow, all of it? Every meeting. Mark didn't argue. Understood. Quinn didn't sleep much that night. By morning, Mark had a location. She works Terminal 6, late shift, I confirmed with 2 sources. Her manager said she clocks out at 7:30. Quinn didn't reply. He was already halfway to the elevator. He boarded his jet alone, told the pilot to avoid the main hangars and landed at a private terminal near the airport. No fanfare. No driver. Just him, a rented SUV, and a vague plan he hadn't thought through. It was nearly 7 when he parked in a visitor lot and walked toward Terminal 6. The airport buzzed with end-of-day travelers, announcements echoing overhead, wheels of suitcases clattering on tile. He kept his head down and stayed near the walls, avoiding attention. At 7:20, he saw her. She was walking toward the staff exit, pulling her vest off and shaking out her curls. Her bag was slung over one shoulder. She looked tired, but there was something in her expression, something quiet and determined that made him pause. He stepped into her path. Delilah stopped short, eyes widening. You're not serious. I said I'd find you. You weren't kidding, not even a little. She stared at him for a moment, then crossed her arms. So what, you just flew across the country to say hi? I flew across the country because I couldn't stop thinking about you. Delilah blinked. That's something. I want to take you to dinner. She arched an eyebrow. You don't even know me. I know you stayed after your shift to help a stranger. I know you're sharp and funny and didn't ask me for a single thing when you could have. And I know I haven't met anyone like you in a long time. She studied him, expression unreadable. I'm not asking you to fall in love with me, he added. Just dinner, one meal, no expectations. Delilah glanced at the clock. There's a diner down the street. I usually stop there for coffee after work. Lead the way. They walked in silence through the parking lot and toward a small corner diner with flickering neon and cracked leather booths. Inside, it smelled like fries and burnt toast. A waitress with a silver bun waved to Delilah as they slid into a booth in the back. You weren't what I expected, Delilah said once they had menus in hand. Neither were you. She didn't look at the menu. What are you really doing here? I told you. I wanted to see you again. No offense, Quinn, but I've met enough men to know when someone's running from something. He didn't answer right away. Delilah waited. I've spent the last 6 years building a company that everyone said would fail. I proved them wrong. I sold it for more money than I knew what to do with. Now I sit in boardrooms and listen to people talk about how smart I am. He looked at her. And none of it matters, she leaned back. That's heavy for a first date, he smiled faintly. Told you I wasn't asking you to fall in love with me. Delilah rested her elbows on the table. So what would you do if you weren't being brilliant in boardrooms? I don't know. Maybe fly around the country tracking down women I can't forget. She shook her head, laughing quietly. You've got lines. I've only used them on you. The waitress came by with coffee and took their order. Delilah sipped hers, watching him over the rim of the mug. You didn't tell me your last name at the airport, she said. Didn't want to scare you off. She tilted her head. So you knew I'd look you up, did you? Of course I did. And I thought you'd be taller. That made him laugh. I'll wear lifts next time. They ate dinner, burgers, fries, and milkshakes, and the conversation twisted and turned through everything from childhood disasters to bad first jobs. Quinn found himself telling her about the time he accidentally wiped a server and took down an entire company's email for 2 days. She confessed that she once dropped a tray of drinks on a passenger who turned out to be a movie star. When they stepped back into the night, the air was cool and the sky had turned velvet blue. Do you need a ride? He asked. I live a few blocks up. I'll walk you. They strolled past shuttered storefronts and street lamps that buzzed faintly overhead. Her apartment building was older, with ivy climbing the side and a rusted gate in front. Thanks for dinner, she said, pausing by the steps. Thanks for not walking away when I showed up like a maniac. Still might. He met her gaze. Can I see you again? Delilah hesitated. You're not exactly local. I have access to planes, he said, and I'm very good at clearing my schedule. She studied him, then nodded once. Call me next time you're in town. He leaned closer. What if I'm here tomorrow? She smiled. Then I guess you'll have to wait and see. The door clicked behind her as she disappeared into the building. Quinn stood there for a long moment before turning and walking slowly down the street, his heart beating harder than it had in years. Quinn stood outside Delilah's building the next morning, watching the windows for any sign of her. He didn't know which apartment she lived in, and he wasn't about to start buzzing random doorbells like a lunatic. So he leaned against a lamppost, coffee in one hand, a paper bag in the other, and waited. At precisely 7:46, she stepped out wearing a gray hoodie and jeans, her hair tucked under a cap. She stopped abruptly when she saw him. You're persistent, she said, adjusting the strap of her canvas bag. I brought breakfast. She eyed the bag. If that's a croissant, I might forgive the early ambush. Chocolate chip muffin. Warm. You're lucky that's my weakness. They walked together toward the bus stop, the morning traffic humming around them. Quinn handed her the coffee. She took a sip and tilted her head. Not bad. You remembered I like hazelnut. I have a very selective memory. I bet. They reached the bench. Delilah sat, unwrapping the muffin. He stayed standing, watching a group of pigeons bicker over a discarded wrapper. You always wait for the bus, he asked. I don't have a car. I'm not a fan of rideshares, and I like the quiet, he nodded. I could drive you, she gave him a look. You flew across the country. You're not staying to chauffeur me through LA traffic. I'm not flying back today, she blinked. You're what? I cleared the week. Delilah studied him. You cleared your billionaire schedule for a girl you met at an airport. I cleared it because I wanted to understand why one conversation with you unhooked something in me that hasn't moved in years. Wow, she said softly. You're really not used to being told no, are you? Not particularly. She broke off another piece of muffin. So what happens when I tell you I have to work every day this week? I wait. You wait, he shrugged. I'm not in a hurry. Delilah looked at him, really looked. What do you want from me, Quinn? I don't know yet, but I'm not leaving until I find out. The bus pulled up and she stood with a sigh. I have a double shift. You'll be bored out of your mind. I've been bored for years, Delilah. I think I can handle a few hours. She hesitated, then reached into her bag and pulled out a key card with a bright orange lanyard. Guest pass. Gets you through security. Don't make me regret it. Quinn took it, their fingers brushing for a second longer than necessary. I won't. By noon, Quinn had found a corner in the terminal near a faux leather armchair and a row of charging stations. He watched planes come and go, occasionally catching glimpses of Delilah weaving through the chaos with a clipboard in hand and a headset over one ear. She didn't stop to talk, but she looked his way more than once. Around 5, she finally dropped into the seat beside him, her vest crumpled under one arm and her water bottle nearly empty. "You lasted longer than most of my coworkers," she said, wiping her forehead with a napkin. "I'm not most people," she glanced at him. "You don't get bored watching strangers argue about gate changes and lost luggage." Surprisingly not. She unscrewed the cap and took a long drink. "We had a guy yell that his dog was psychic and predicted the plane would crash. Security had to escort him out. Was the dog right? So far, no," he leaned forward. "You always keep this pace, it's nonstop, but I like it, it keeps my head quiet," he nodded slowly. "I get that." Delilah turned to face him. "All right, Mr. No Agenda. You followed me to work, survived airport seating, and resisted the urge to check your phone for 7 hours. What now?" "I was thinking dinner, but somewhere without plastic cutlery this time." She raised an eyebrow. "You don't strike me as a somewhere guy. You strike me as a let me buy the building and turn it into a one-night pop-up restaurant guy." He looked at her, thoughtful. "Would that impress you? Honestly, not really. But if you know a place with real plates and food that doesn't come in paper wrappers, I might be open. I'll handle it." He stood and offered his hand. "Come on." Delilah hesitated, then took it. He led her outside to a waiting car, sleek, black, and unbranded, no driver in sight. "You rented a car and didn't chauffeur me to work?" "I didn't want to scare you off before coffee." She slid into the passenger seat. "Smart." They drove through winding streets toward the hills, the sun dipping low behind them. Delilah glanced at him. "You always this quiet in cars?" "Only when I'm thinking." "What about how long I can keep pretending this is casual?" She didn't answer, but her fingers tightened slightly around the edge of her seat. The car pulled up to a gated property nestled into the hillside. It wasn't a restaurant. It wasn't anything commercial at all. Delilah blinked. "This is a house. It's a friend's place. He's in Europe for the month, left me the keys. And you decided to use it as a dinner spot." "I brought in a chef, just us, no crowd, no cameras." She stared at him. "You set up a private meal in a mansion for a woman you've known less than a week. I told you, I'm not in a hurry, but I am intentional." They walked through a side gate into a courtyard strung with soft lights. A long table was set beneath a canopy of flowering vines. Candles flickered between crystal glasses and white plates. The smell of roasted herbs and citrus drifted through the air. Delilah let out a slow breath. "You don't do anything halfway, do you?" "Not when it matters." Dinner was unlike anything she'd experienced. The chef, a soft-spoken man named Luca, served salmon over saffron risotto, grilled asparagus, and a lemon tart that made her close her eyes for a full 5 seconds. They talked about everything except the obvious. No mention of money or companies, or the fact that he'd flown across the country twice to see her. Instead, they talked about the books they'd read growing up, the worst advice they'd ever taken, and what they each thought made a person brave. "I used to think bravery was about being loud," Delilah said, setting down her fork. "But I think it's more about choosing to stay when everything in you wants to run." Quinn looked at her, something shifting in his expression. "I always ran. I built my whole life around being untouchable. But lately I've been wondering if I missed the point entirely." Delilah didn't say anything. He reached across the table, his fingers brushing hers. "I don't want to miss this." She looked at him, eyes searching. "You don't even know what this is yet. I know it's the first thing I've felt in a long time that doesn't feel like strategy or performance. I know I look at you and forget what I'm supposed to be doing with the rest of my life. And I know that scares me." Delilah stood slowly, walking to the edge of the courtyard where the city lights pulsed below like a heartbeat. "I don't want to be a story you tell your friends about how you tried something different and it didn't work." He walked to her, standing just behind, not touching. "You're not a story, you're the part that makes the rest of it make sense." She turned. "You say things like that and I don't know whether to kiss you or run." "Stay," he said quietly. Delilah stepped closer. This doesn't feel real. Maybe that's what makes it worth it. She kissed him. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing, just a collision of everything unspoken between them. The city fell away. The lights, the house, the distance between their worlds, all of it dissolved. When they finally pulled apart, her voice was barely above a whisper. I don't do this. Neither do I. She rested her head against his chest, and for the first time in years, Quinn felt still, not empty, not restless, just still, and that terrified him more than anything. Quinn stood in the middle of his penthouse living room in Manhattan 2 weeks later, surrounded by unopened mail and stacked garment bags. The rain outside streaked across the glass like ink, soft and constant, muting the city's usual roar. He'd landed only an hour ago, but the moment his shoes hit the polished floors, the space felt too large again. He looked around, suddenly aware that nothing about this place had changed, but he had. He should have felt at ease here. Instead, he felt restless, like he'd left something essential behind. Mark entered holding a tablet, his expression unreadable. I pushed the board meeting to Thursday. The Singapore call's confirmed, and the gala next weekend is still on. I'm not going to the gala, Mark blinked. You're hosting it. I'll write a check. Send someone in my place. Mark hesitated, then placed the tablet on the bar. You've been different since LA. Quinn didn't respond. Mark waited another beat. Should I ask if this has anything to do with Delilah Vaughn? Quinn turned away from the windows. I told her I'd be back in a few days. It's been 2 weeks. She hasn't called. She's not the one who disappeared. Mark studied him. So go back. She deserves more than someone who can't decide which coast he actually lives on. Then stop deciding. Quinn looked up. You've spent your life building things from nothing, Mark said. Start there. Later that night, Quinn opened his laptop and pulled up a search window. He scrolled through one of Delilah's old social media profiles, mostly dormant, but one post caught his attention. It was a photo of her standing in front of a closed-down building, all brick and boarded windows. The caption read, "This used to be my dad's old community clinic. One day, maybe something good will stand here again." Quinn didn't sleep. By morning, he was on a call with his legal team. I want to acquire the property outright. Get me the owner's information. I don't care what it costs. Sir, there's zoning complications. Fix them. He hung up and started packing. Delilah was unlocking her apartment door with one hand and balancing a grocery bag in the other. When she saw him leaning against the stairwell railing, she froze. You're lucky I didn't drop this milk. I'll buy you another one. I don't need another one. He stepped forward. I needed time. But I should have said that before disappearing. She pushed the door open and set the bag inside. You don't owe me an explanation, but I want to give you one. Delilah leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Then talk. I thought if I stayed, I'd ruin it. That if I let myself fall, I'd lose control of everything I built. And now I don't care about control if it means losing you. She didn't answer. I left without telling you the truth. Delilah looked at him. Which part? My father was a ghost. He moved us city to city chasing ideas that never worked. I watched my mother swallow hope like it was medicine. When I finally made money, I swore I'd never owe anyone anything again, but I've been hiding behind that vow for years, thinking independence kept me safe. He stepped closer. You didn't ask me for anything. You didn't try to impress me or fit into my world. You just showed up as yourself, and for the first time I wanted to stop running. Delilah's voice was quiet. You said you didn't want me to be a story. You're not. You're the turning point. She looked at him, conflict flickering behind her eyes. I bought the old clinic, he said, her breath caught. What? The one your dad ran? From the photo? I'm rebuilding it into a community health center under your name. Delilah blinked. Why would you do that? Because you believed in it, because it mattered to you, because you matter to me. She stepped out onto the landing, her voice low. You don't have to buy buildings to prove something. I know, that's not what this is. This is me saying I see you, all of you. And I want to build something that lasts with you. Delilah looked up at him, something unspoken passing between them. "You're still a mess," she said. "I'm your mess if you'll have me." She walked down the steps slowly, stopping in front of him. "You're going to have to do more than buy property and quote emotional metaphors." "I'm not going anywhere this time." Delilah searched his face. "I want roots, Quinn, not promises." "Then let me plant them." She didn't speak. He reached into his jacket pocket and handed her an envelope. "What's this?" "An invitation." She opened it slowly. Inside was a formal card printed on thick ivory stock. The Delilah Vaughn Community Center Grand Opening Fundraiser Gala hosted by Quinn Darnell. She looked up, stunned. "You named it after me. You rebuilt me." "It's only fair." Delilah's throat worked, emotion catching there. "You actually did it. And there's only one person I want standing next to me when the doors open." She folded the card carefully. "When is it?" "This Saturday." "That's fast." "I don't want to wait anymore." Delilah shook her head, a smile tugging at the corner of her mouth. "You're unbelievable. Believe in me." She stepped forward, and for a long moment neither of them spoke. Then she whispered, "Don't disappear again. Not without you." They kissed, slow and certain, like the answer to a question neither of them had dared to ask out loud. The gala was held in a newly renovated downtown space, the old brick building transformed into a glowing beacon of glass and light. Inside, guests in evening wear sipped champagne beneath skylights, soft jazz floating through the air. Delilah stood at the top of the stairs in a navy gown, her curls pinned back, her name on the plaque outside the building. Quinn walked toward her in a tailored tuxedo, no tie. "You look like the future," he said. "You look like someone who finally stopped running." He held out his hand. "Dance with me." They moved together through the crowd, the room blurring around them. "You scared me," she whispered. "You saved me." Outside, cameras flashed and reporters called his name, but all Quinn saw was her. Later that night, when the crowd had thinned and the music softened, Quinn took her hand and led her into the courtyard lit with lanterns and stars. He reached into his jacket again. Delilah's breath caught. "Quinn, it's not a ring," he said quickly. "Not tonight." "But it's a key." She stared at the small velvet box in his hand. A house in Las Vegas, nothing enormous, just a place to start. She opened the box slowly, fingers trembling. He stepped closer. "I don't want to build skyscrapers anymore. I want to build a life with mornings and grocery trips and keys on the same hook." Delilah looked up at him, eyes shining. "You're serious?" "I've never been more." She closed the box and stepped into his arms. "You realize if we do this, you'll have to start liking sunshine and traffic and my weird obsession with 80s sitcoms." "I'll adapt, and I'm going to keep working. I'm not quitting my job to become some trophy girlfriend. I'd be disappointed if you did. And I still think you're too smooth sometimes. I'll try harder." She kissed him again, and this time it wasn't cautious or uncertain, it was a promise. A few months later, the center opened its doors to the public. Delilah stood behind the front desk, clipboard in hand, organizing volunteers. Quinn arrived with fresh coffee and kissed her cheek before ducking into a board meeting held in a converted classroom. The city moved around them, loud and relentless. But inside those walls, they had built something steady. Something neither of them had ever expected to find, not in a terminal, not in a missed flight, but in each other. And this time, neither of them was going anywhere. The morning sun crawled across the windows of the Delilah Vaughn Community Center, streaking the glass in soft gold. Inside, everything felt lived in now. The sterile smell of new paint had faded into the warmth of lavender oil diffused at the front desk. Children's voices filtered in from the after-school program in the East Wing, and the low hum of conversation drifted from the clinic waiting area. Delilah stood in her office, surrounded by color-coded folders and a large whiteboard covered in schedules and volunteers' shifts, holding a steaming mug of cinnamon tea. Her gaze drifted to the framed photo on her desk, her and Quinn, taken the night of the gala, both of them caught laughing mid-dance. She resisted the familiar rush in her chest, the one that still surprised her despite everything. A soft knock at the door broke her thoughts, and she looked up to see Quinn leaning against the frame, jacket slung over one shoulder, his hair tousled from the breeze outside. "You're late," she said, glancing at the clock behind her. "I had to stop by the bank." "That's a first." He walked in, set his jacket on the back of her chair, and handed her a small envelope. "What's this?" "Open it." She peeled it open and pulled out a slim card embossed with a gold seal. Her brows drew together as she read. "Annual endowment established in honor of Delilah Vaughn for community health initiatives. Quinn." "It's permanent funding," he said, watching her reaction. "No more scrambling for grants or cutting programs because donations dip." She looked up, stunned. "You didn't even tell me you were doing this." "I wanted it to be a surprise. You've built something remarkable here, Delilah. It deserves security. You deserve security." She set the card down and walked around the desk, pressing a hand to his chest. "You make it really hard not to cry in front of staff." "I've already seen what happens when you cry. You get mean." She laughed once, then sobered. "You didn't have to do this." "I know," he said, his voice quiet, "but I wanted to. Not because I'm trying to impress you or fix anything. Just because I believe in what you've created." She leaned into him, and for a moment the rest of the center faded. The meetings, the programs, the responsibilities, they all quieted beneath the steady beat of his heart against her cheek. "Come with me tonight," he said into her hair. She pulled back slightly. "Where? Just say yes. Is it another surprise mansion?" "No mansions, I promise." That evening, Quinn drove them out of the city, winding through the hills as the sky turned lavender and rust. Delilah sat curled in the passenger seat, watching the terrain shift from highway to narrow backroads lined with eucalyptus trees. "Are you kidnapping me? If I were, I wouldn't have let you bring snacks." She popped another almond into her mouth. "Taché." Eventually, he pulled off onto a gravel path that led to a secluded overlook. There, between two tall pines, was a wooden platform strung with soft lights and a telescope aimed at the sky. A small table was set with two chairs, a lantern, and a vintage record player. Delilah stepped out of the car slowly. "You did all this?" "I had help," he admitted, "but the idea was mine." She turned in a slow circle, taking it in. "Why here?" "Because this is where I decided I didn't want to live without you," he said simply. "I came here the morning after we first met." "I sat right there," he pointed to a nearby bench, "and realized I'd never felt more off balance in my life." She looked up at him. "And I liked it," he added. They sat, shared wine and a box of her favorite takeout Thai curry and sticky rice, and watched the stars bloom overhead. After a while, Quinn stood and offered his hand. "Dance with me." "There's no music." He dropped the needle on the record player, and a soft jazz melody filled the air, lilting and warm. She stepped into his arms, resting her head against his shoulder. "Do you think," she asked, "that this was always going to happen?" He considered. "No, I think we had 1,000 chances to miss each other, and we didn't." She pulled back just enough to look up at him. "I used to think real love was supposed to feel like lightning, but this is steadier," he finished. "Like gravity." They danced until the record ended, then lay on a blanket beneath the stars. Delilah traced the outline of a constellation with her finger. "I never thought I'd end up here," she whispered. "Not just with you, but..." "Happy?" Quinn turned toward her. "Do you want more?" "More." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small ring box. Her breath hitched. "I know you said you didn't want a trophy life," he said, "and I'm not offering one. I'm offering long mornings and burnt toast and arguing about what color to paint the kitchen. I'm offering every version of me, even the ones that are still figuring it out." He opened the box. Inside was a delicate gold band with a single round cut diamond, simple, elegant, unmistakably her. "I'm offering forever." Delilah looked down at the ring, then up at him. "You really don't do halfway. Not when it comes to you." She took the box, closed it gently, and set it beside them. Then she kissed him, slow and certain. "I don't need a big ceremony," she said. "I don't want to spend months picking out tablecloths." "Neither do I. I just want you, every day, wherever we are." "Then let's do it." 6 weeks later, they stood barefoot on the beach in Big Sur, surrounded by only a few close friends and the sound of crashing waves. Delilah wore a dress the color of sea mist, her curls loose around her shoulders. Quinn wore a white shirt rolled at the sleeves, pants cuffed at his ankles, and a grin that didn't fade once. They said their vows with sand between their toes and salt in their hair. Later that night, they danced beneath a canopy of stars and string lights, the ocean wind wrapping around them like a promise. Mark toasted, slightly drunk on champagne and emotion. "To Quinn," he said, raising his glass, for finally finding the one thing he couldn't out-negotiate. Everyone laughed. "And to Delilah," he added, for being the only person who ever made this man miss a board meeting. Months passed. The community center thrived. Delilah launched 3 new programs for mental health support, and Quinn quietly funded a scholarship for underprivileged medical students in her father's name. They bought a modest Spanish-style home in Los Feliz, with a lemon tree in the backyard and a creaky porch swing that Quinn insisted on fixing himself. Every Sunday, they hosted brunch for friends and neighbors, filling their kitchen with laughter and the smell of cinnamon pancakes. Quinn still flew to New York occasionally, but he always came home by Friday, and every night, no matter how chaotic the day had been, they ended the evening on that porch swing, her head on his shoulder, fingers laced together. They didn't need lightning, they had gravity. And that was more than enough.